Welcome back to another episode of Analyze Scripts. We are joined here today by some really exciting guests to talk about the movie The Blind Side. So before we get started, I'm going to quickly introduce who they are, and then we will get into the movie. So we have Zerrell Stallings and Qur-an Webb, who are the co-founders of the Association of the Black Sports Officials. The ABSO was conceived in 2016 following an incident of unfair practices of evaluation and elevation of Black officials on an officiating board in Connecticut. ABSO was able to advocate on behalf of Black individuals and successfully shift improving the equality among Black officials and played an intricate role in rewriting the bylaws and policies for said board. Co-founder of Association of Black Sports Officials, raised in New Jersey, Qur-an now resides in Connecticut. He is a graduate of Southern Connecticut State University and University of Connecticut and has worked in social work and media literacy fields. Qur-an has been able to be involved with sports in some capacity for most of his life. He's been officiating sports for over 20 years. Qur-an has officiated in the past for Central Connecticut Association of Football Officials and basketball for Central Connecticut IAABO Board 6. In January 2018, ABSO was formed. ABSO's goal is to bring equality for all Black officials across all sports on all levels throughout the country. ABSO is designed not only to be a voice of advocacy for Black officials by providing support and resources, but to educate and train all officials, athletes, administrations, leagues, etc. on and off athletic fields. Through these efforts, not only will Black officials be better off, but the community and entire sports landscape will be better off as well. So if you can you share where our listeners can find you, like on a website or social media?
Sure, no problem. But first, before we do that, I would just want to make sure, Zerrell is able to introduce himself and his background or what have you. For some reason, I'm not sure why that wasn't stated, but it's all good. I mean, we got him here so we can hear him. We can hear him out.
Yeah, it's all good. I'm Zerrell Stallings. I'm a football official, been a football official for the last 12 years, high school football official. I'm a business owner here in the Greater Hartford community, Greater Hartford area. Um, Other than that, co-founder of ABSO. Me and Qur-an also run another agency that provides officials for youth sports, and that's Independent Sports Officials uh, Alliance. So those are the just kind of things that myself and Qur-an are into, and that's it. That's me.
Cool.
Well, it's nice to have you both join us today. Thank you so much for making the time, and we're really excited to hear your point of view on this movie.
Thank you.
No problem.
So a little bit about The Blind Side. Just the movie came out in 2009. It got a lot of buzz. Sandra Bullock won an Oscar for her role as Michael Oher's mom, Leanne Tuohy. And it was based on the book by the same name by Michael Lewis. Michael Oher was played by Quentin Aaron in it. And this movie was pretty popular. And what was worth noting is that the Tuohy family appeared to be kind of at all of the events, right? So they were at the Oscars, they were at the premiere, and now looking back, Michael Oher wasn't. So, he didn't come to those events. And I think that probably speaks volumes about his feelings on the movie then. And obviously he's been more vocal lately. But where do you want to get started today, Katrina?
I think, the thing that jumps out about this movie to me, and one reason we've been wanting to cover it, is just its depiction of this sort of concept we call white saviorism, where, this movie really depicts like this white, wealthy family plucking up this Black boy and saving him and sort of changing the course of his life, changing the course of their lives. And in rewatching it in preparation for this episode, I was really struck by how many like really awful racial stereotypes it pushed. And I found myself wondering like what is actually true about his background. about Michael Oher's background. You know, like right away we see, you know, who the little boy who's playing Michael, like in a car with his friend's dad, who he's been staying with. And we see them drive from like his part of town, which you come to find is like the bad part of town, where there's a lot of people of color, things look run down. And you see him drive into the nice part of town where he's going to go to this private Christian school and eventually, you know, gets what we were told was adopted by the Tuohy family. And so right away, even just that, like the drive, I feel like is already pushing like some really negative stereotypes. They say that his IQ is only 80, his GPA is 0.6. You know, they just portray him as this like kind of like dumb, reserved, like almost socially inept person. And right away, you know, we see the admissions staff, again, who's all white men, say, you know, you don't admit Michael Oher because of sports, you admit him because it's the right thing to do. But really the undercurrent is they saw he was really good at sports. And kind of that's why they wanted him there. You know, we also hear about how his mother, they call her a crack addict a lot in the movie. They just use really harmful language, and say, you know, he was forcibly removed from her care. We see him like go back to his neighborhood, and just the things that are depicted, I think, are pretty harmful. And it comes, you know, in watching, you know, the recent HBO documentary and reading more about what Michael Oher's been saying in the present day, we come to find out like a lot of that wasn't true. And that, I don't know, I guess that's where I want to start.
Do you guys have any comments on that?
Well, I would say, you know, I reviewed the movie again too because it was a while. But yeah, I could definitely understand your POV. I definitely thought that throughout the movie, the white savior coming down, you know, even her friends, you know, even to the point where her friends were mocking her, you
Yeah.
know, and things of that nature. So, no, I think that's a good place to start, because that's probably the most honest place to start is right there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the more recent documentary, I think it came out this year on HBO or Max, spoke a lot with his friends and family from kind of growing up. They spoke with the man who was kind of housing him, and that
Right.
it was not, you know, he did have a bedroom, like him and
He did have a
that
bed.
man's son were really close friends, and it was like not a bad place. They spoke to his social aptitude and how he was like really well liked and really like an
Smart,
extrovert, like, you know,
yeah.
socially he had a ton of friends, everyone loved him, and how he was very intelligent, which I thought was interesting. Then when they also spoke about his football career, he memorized, you know, as an NFL player, I would imagine. But he memorizes all the plays. Like, he's very intelligent, at both academically and then as an athlete. So I thought that for him, and I guess he had spoke on it at least once, like that for him was really the most harmful part, was the depiction of his intelligence, and how low it was in the movie. Yeah.
And I just add to that, I think just to sensationalize, you know, what the media does when we're talking about film, television, news coverage, just in general here, and to that point, there, portion in regards to the difference into who he actually was intellectually versus what they portrayed him to be here. You know, I would feel some kind of way as well too, in regards to like, you know, he insult my intelligence, you know, belittling me, et cetera, in regards to all of that. So I know just with the media, just as a whole here, and again, I know ultimately the bottom line is to sell a movie and get people to go and purchase tickets, et cetera here. But you know, it's a rough field in regards to just like really ultimately not caring, you know, about, you know, actually the human side of it. And I know, yourself, and Katrina here just being, in this field of the people business here, we know that human side is very important here. And I think just, that wasn't displayed, as far as some of the things they portrayed him to be.
Yeah. So just to clarify for if anyone's listening who hasn't seen the newer documentary on HBO, I highly encourage you to watch it. I think it's only like an hour long or so. Interestingly, Michael Oher also wasn't involved in that, but I think it's because there's some ongoing litigation. It's said at the end of it. But basically, some of the big things that were totally incorrect, again, his intelligence level, his social aptitude, and, we see Leanne and the Tuohy family like rescue him from the rain where he has nowhere to go, he has nowhere to stay, right? Like that's one of the pivotal scenes in the movie. And it turns out like that's not true. Like he was staying with his friend's family and with his friend's dad, and he could continue staying there. They didn't kick him out. They didn't ask him to leave. It sounds like they really cared about him. They were taking care of him. And it sounds like what actually happened from their point of view, as they say in the documentary, is that Mr. Tuohy said, hey, he could come stay with us. We live closer to the school. And then somehow, like, he ended up staying there kind of forever. But it seems like that conversation happened after people started recognizing how good he was at sports. And so that left a bad taste in my mouth. And then the other thing that happened was there's this scene where the little boy, SJ, who's played by this like, gregarious little kid who's like super adorable, right, in the movie. But you show like this, like, how old was that kid? 8? This like 8-year-old basically like teaching him, Michael, how to be like social, how to talk to people, and then basically teaches him how to play football using all those condiments, remember, with like the hot sauce bottles and stuff. And like everyone in the movie is like, Michael knew how to play football. Like he didn't need someone to teach him. And again, just all of that just continues like sending this message that he's like, not smart, doesn't know what to do, and kind of like would just have been adrift and lost without this white family coming to save him. And I just, again, all of it just left such a bad taste in my mouth. Again, with just how much was sensationalized, and that the things that were sensationalized just push this like really icky like narrative about, just these icky narratives about, young Black boys. It just really bothered me.
And rewatching it for myself this time, I was really interested in kind of the themes of like local or more local sports trafficking. So even as Mr. Tuohy is kind of like, oh, you could stay with us, I was like, thinking in my head, and I don't know if it is clear, maybe it is and I missed it, but like, was that because then he could go to that school district? Or I'm thinking kind of a part of what you gentleman had talked about in a training that I attended was just like, the zip code switching and kind of like living with different families in order to play at a different school. So if you could share just with our listeners, like, what is sports trafficking? Where does it happen? I think some people would be surprised at how local it is.
Sure, no problem. I mean, again, it's the harboring, of minors in regards when we talk about to play athletic, I'm about to say event, but this is play some type of athletics here where, individuals are being compensated and, you're getting the benefits, reaping the benefits of it. And sometimes it's internationally, it's obviously a huge thing, harboring, youth from other countries over to the United States here, but it's happening probably smack dead here in the United States as well, too. Because when we talk about trafficking, I mean, the sports piece, is a big part here, but when you get into obviously the sex and labor trafficking, it all interacts with one another here, and I think it's just in regards to, just to talk about the labor, sex trafficking, the forced fraud, and corrosion here, and that's those 3 words, tie into the feds here when they looking to get, some type of adjudication or anything when we get into the criminal side of it, but it's applicable to the sports piece here. You're forcing individuals to leave their homeland or native land or their town that they're from here. There's been situations throughout the United States, where athletes are being kept housed in housing and, rents are being paid for these kids to stay in these places just to compete here. And we know it's a meal ticket for a lot of people here in regards to, to see him or her succeed as far as whether it's in high school and moving on to college and ultimately the pros and getting that big payday. And, so it happens more times than not, and it has, as far as it's been going on. And hopefully, I answered the question. I'm not sure if Zerrell wanted to add on or anything.
Well, I was just gonna say in the context of the movie, um, I'm gonna go backwards because it was in my mind backwards. So, when he's being interviewed by the NCAA,
Yeah.
right, that they was essentially asking him that, but in a more professional, I guess,
Right.
manner or tone. Um, and then going to back to your original question about the high school, it wasn't that he was in the wrong district because it was in the movie it was a Catholic school, so they were private. You can be anywhere, but what happens when you have these private Catholic schools or prep schools that are highly competitive, they will go in the inner city, pluck a kid, set them up, get around all the legalities of it and what have you. Um, so those are your forms. They're just not presented in that way of how me and Quran, you know, how we presented in our educational piece of sports trafficking. The essential is the same thing. Um, and we've witnessed it here in Connecticut. We've seen cases here where, it wasn't called sports trafficking, but some coaches got in trouble and things of that nature. So I think the more that we shed light on it, the more important and the more serious uh, you know the agencies of sports will take more heed to and put their foot down.
Yeah.
Can you speak a bit about some of the negative ramifications that can come from sports trafficking? Like, I can think of some that I could assume would come from it, but I wonder, given your experience, what you've seen, like in real life.
I would say probably first and foremost, the detachment from your bio family and the family that they were removed from, regardless of the situation here. This is people that raised you, gave birth to you, and just your community as a whole, and culture environment here, being thrust into somewhere completely foreign or unknown, and sometimes it might not be a call maybe once a week, once a month, depending on the circumstances and not that connection. I think with your family, I think that's one of the first things that happens here. But I think just and when we're talking about minors here, we know the brain develops. They change their age all the time here. It was 23, 25, 26. Who knows what it is now? But I know it's the latter part of the 20s here as far as the brain being fully developed here. So just think about everything an individual goes through as far as a minor, just the disconnect from the bio family, trying to learn a whole nother culture, another language potentially, depending on where he or she is from. Just those are just a couple examples as far as some of the side effects to what happens here, and being forced probably to do something you might not want to do. You might some people may have a love for the sport, some may not, but they understand, quote unquote, it's a way out, and to help the family here. So I mean, those are just a couple examples of mine.
Yeah. And then thinking of like the kids who don't make it, so it's like, I would say at a minimum, maybe there's a financial incentive for them when they're not already being taken advantage by all the people who helped them. But, when you don't make it, you're then, you were displaced, you didn't finish out your important developmental years where maybe, would have been best for you. And now you didn't get a scholarship, or now, you don't have that carrot that they were kind of dangling in front of you for the idea of kind of moving you in with someone else. So I think, it speaks to maybe the other forms as well of trafficking, as just like minors getting lost then, and people kind of, then becoming unhoused and, so on and so forth, just not having, their support team with them.
And what that does to a child's identity and their sense of self, right? Like if you don't get the scholarship or you don't make it to the big leagues, like I think that just would really mess with your sense of self and your importance. And it reminds me so much of what we saw with Britney Spears and with other child stars. It's kind of similar, but I guess, the local, the international, just thinking about it from such a small scale to such a big scale, it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Not definitely not. Not Zerrell, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, their mental health, because at some point the reality is gonna set in that you're just a meal ticket.
Yeah.
At some
Oh,
point it's gonna set in, and how do you cope with that as a child? Because to Q's point earlier, if you're not developing until 20 in your late 20s, mid 20s, I mean, that's going to take a toll, because and then you're always going to have that in your head that I'm still the guy, I'm still this, and you're going to always try to keep chasing that and chasing it, and just, but the reality is there, and you know it. It's just hard for them to accept it, and it's terrible because a lot of them have been coddled and told that they was going to be the next LeBron or the next, Tom Brady or whoever, whatever sports they're into. And then when they're all used up, you
who's
know,
there?
right, nobody's there. So,
Right. Exactly. I think I'm making a huge assumption and generalization, but I'd imagine that as these children grow and start to realize what's actually going on, like we kind of see, it seems like, again, we're not analyzing anyone personally because we can't, right? But it seems like based on what we're seeing in the media, Michael Oher, as he's gotten older, has a different perspective, at least compared to how they depict his perspective in the movie, which again may be totally false. But yeah, like once you start to realize what's going on, you probably don't have the support system around you to really like process that. Like it actually probably goes against what the people around you want you to be doing to
right,
see what's actually happening, right? They're not going to be like, oh yeah, well, let's go to therapy and we can talk about how I've been exploiting you and using you, and I'll still give you a place to live.
right,
No, absolutely, and I think too, you know, those who are in these situations, male, female, here, there's a small percentage that make able to make the connection. Like, okay, this might not pan out for me, but I'm going to use this and take every advantage of it possible here in regards to like make it work for me here as far as educationally and resources and supports and learn who's around me. I know there's a small percentage. I know that, and the education probably needs to be out there in regards to just everyone in general. Like, hey, the clock, and I use it metaphorically here, like, the clock's going to hit all zeros here, and whether it's high school, college, or the pros here, and just taking everything along the way, what you can use in regards to what you've learned to better yourself in life. And we think about Michael Oher, he reached the highest of highs here,
Yeah.
as far as you want to talk about the perception, whether, NFL, big contracts, everything here, but still, this still lingers with him, and it's still, as far as the whole situation, whether it's the movie or how he's being portrayed to other folks here, and there's probably just some other stuff internally that he's probably had going on here. Just and I say that to say, so it's like no amount of money or prestige can, make or erase that, and it's
Oh
quite
yeah.
obvious, and it's quite obvious with him.
hmm
Yeah.
hmm
100%. And I think, I can't imagine what must be going on for him internally. Like, at least in the movie, they have that scene where, the Tuohys have decided they want to adopt him. And it seems like, at least the way it's coming across, is it's like coming from a benevolent place and hoping to help Michael and further his future. And they're all sitting at the table, and their biological children are like so excited to hear his response, and I think Leanne says something like, what do you think about, becoming, like a permanent member of our family, or something. I don't think they use the word adoption, or maybe they do. And he says something like, I thought I already was. And everyone's like, oh, that's so cute. And again, it's kind of like, is that again a jab? Like, well, he's kind of so dumb he doesn't realize what's going on, or is it speaking to how he really does feel like he's part of this family and he's loved and it's so happy? Um, but then it's come out that they didn't actually adopt him; they entered a conservatorship, And that really blew my mind, because in the movie they use the word adoption or guardian. I think they say they're his legal guardians over and over and over. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but it's my understanding that adoption and legal guardianship are very different from conservatorship. But I wonder, Zerrell, Qur-an, can you speak to that in any ways?
Actually, funny. I actually can. I have guardianship of my god. So conservatorship and guardianship is totally different. There is a different process. Um, I'm sure you have to go to in front of some sort of judge, but you're not. I think what happened with them in the movie was they couldn't get his mom probably to sign off. So that's probably was the easiest way to be able to be able to do things legally with him.
Yeah, because
So
you see them at the like Department of Family Services, right? She's like cutting the line to get the
Again, yes.
address, and yeah.
yeah. I mean, she was a pistol through the whole movie. She was a
Yeah.
pistol. So,
But again, that sense of entitlement just bleeds all the way through. I think in the movie, though, they said that he was a ward of the state, so they didn't need his mom's permission. And she was like, "What? You would like give him to me without telling his mama?" And then she went to see the mom. And again, sort of painting her as this like benevolent, like, "Oh, I couldn't possibly do this without telling the mom." But who knows what really happened?
Who knows what happened? And just to add on to this conversation, one, as far as ward of the state, meaning the state has custody of you. So, and again, even with that being said, under 18, as far as for the adoption to actually go through for someone under 18, the parents' rights have to be terminated. First and foremost for adoption to even go through. The conservatorship is, more on the adult side. So
Right.
if that's the move that they made is when he turned 18 legally, he didn't need a parent's decision or anything, mom's decision or what have you to move forward here. But anything under 18, like as far as the adoption piece, parents' rights, have to be terminated. In regards to that, the obtaining legal guardianship, they don't have to be terminated in regards to that. So there's a couple of different avenues under 18, but it appears with the whole conservatorship, if that was the case, they waited till he was 18. This way, they didn't need his parents' permission or the state's permission, because by then he's an adult. Even though if he was a senior in high school, if he's 18, he's 18.
But so then why would they need a conservatorship at all, is my question. If he's 18, couldn't they just like support him without
legal to be able to have some legal jurisdiction over him, paperwork, finances, everything else, as far as some type of legal guardianship or of him as an adult, to have some legal say.
Yeah,
that's what that is.
Right.
I guess like what I know about conservatorship, at least in the state of Connecticut, is from a psychiatrist's point of view, right? That I know that there's two types of conservatorships here: conservatorship of person and then conservatorship of estate. And so conservatorship of person is when you give someone the legal power to make decisions for you about like where you live, your health care, what medications you take, where you go to school, if you're going to school, things like that. Then conservatorship of finance is someone who has legal control over your finances. And at least as a psychiatrist, that comes up in our line of work. If someone has a mental illness, anything ranging from schizophrenia to bipolar disorder to dementia, to neurocognitive impairment, it can also come up for medical illnesses that might affect someone's decision making, where someone is so impaired that they're not able to manage these things on their own. But the key piece is someone has to be so impaired that they're not able to manage these things on their own. And I think that's where, again, like Britney Spears' conservatorship has been in the media a lot, because the big question is like, well, how can you say you're so impaired you need a conservator and yet you're doing all these things? And I think in the documentary about The Blind Side that came out recently, they said like in the paperwork, it says like he's of sound mind, like there are no disabilities or anything. And someone commented like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen, because you need that to have a conservator.
Right.
So it's real confusing.
Interesting you mentioned that, and I bring up you mentioned white saviorism, but I also bring up white privilege. I mean, because basically, I mean, when that's all said and done, like they probably knew some people to make a decision as far as judge or what have you to
sign
award
off.
to sign off on all that. Especially to your point, Katrina, when you just mentioned like he has a sound mind, and everything else here. So it was probably some behind the scenes things that were moving and shaking in regards to get things signed off as far as to be a conservator, for him to have some say around his finances or what have you. And to your point here, obviously in Connecticut with some things going on, developmentally delays and everything else here. That's usually when conservatorship plays a big role here in regards to preliminary guardians and all that other stuff here. So yeah.
Right, but it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, and so please let me know if I am, that you can't just walk down the street and be like, there's an 18-year-old high schooler, I'm going to be his conservator now. Without
steps.
Right? That makes
steps, studies, everything that ties it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm just speaking from my own experience. There have been times where the judge has denied conservatorship for patients we've had on the inpatient unit who are so ill, and yet they still preserve their autonomy, right? These aren't decisions that I've seen made very lightly. So when this came up, I just was so confused. I was like, why did they do this? What did this give them that they needed that they couldn't have had without it? And the only things that come to my mind are nefarious, malicious things. I don't know, they could have still supported him in doing good at school, going to college, they
could have assisted him make decisions hey, you, like many 18-year-olds, here's your first contract or here's your first deal. Do you want to talk to a financial advisor? Do you want to set up a bank account? For you though, I'm giving you advice freely. Why do I have to be signing off on it? And then that just feels
why is the money coming to me? Right? Or
I would say 3 letters, ROI.
Return on investment.
I mean, I stay in my house, I fed you, I clothed you, I made sure you got the proper education, so forth and so on. And I'm just being, just thinking from their crazy perspective.
Yeah.
So I need to be able to recoup this at some point. I mean, just think about the movie. If I'm your conservator, right, I can use your likeness without your permission. I mean, you think if he's feeling like he's feeling now, I don't think he would have signed off on the script.
Right.
That's interesting. I was thinking, I didn't even think about the movie rights. I would gander that is probably the majority of it, right? Because he was so uninvolved in that, and I was like, well, how? It's about him,
right?
Let alone thinking about his sports career, which I'm sure obviously was also impacted in a way by them. But yeah, okay, that clears up some questions that I had.
That makes all the sense in the world. I was just gonna add, just in regards to, back to the media and how they portray. We got a black male, young black male, eventually, an adult black male, just thinking about the circumstances as far as I'm just talking about the movie in general, not the person himself here. You're in a situation, big house, family, you get pretty much anything that you want here, so they got it as far as, of course, this black male is not going to say no to this. And do you want to be adopted? Do you want to be adopted? Or whatever the questions that are being asked. Just think about, the pressures of just hearing that, as far as that goes here, being a young man here, I'm going to say no. I'm going to give all this up, that I have as far as versus where I came from, And and again, like I said, I just tie that back to the media and kind of just taking a left turn as far as in regards to what they wanted it to be portrayed. As far as we talk about black men here, and we think about black men, I mean, a handful of movies or what have you there where we depicted it as far as in positive lights, and ain't these stereotypes, white family coming to save us and everything else as well too. So it definitely some of that going on as well. I just wanted to just add that.
No, 100%.
And his experience now, I'm speaking just of what thoughts kind of come to my mind is like if you take someone who's been displaced from their family or, has kind of had to bounce around, even if they are with supports, I would imagine that to an extent, right, that impacts your attachment, right? So you probably don't have like the most secure attachment. And so, when then there's these big, powerful people making all these promises and kind of giving you an Xbox, even though, right, that's like nothing to them, but it's like this big deal that, kind of gives that false sense of like, we got you. And I think someone with maybe not the strongest attachment style is more easily, kind of being able to go along with that. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is exactly grooming. And I think like, it makes me so sad for him as a person and for any other person who goes through this. Cause I'm just thinking like he probably, and again, I'm just totally, making assumptions here. I don't know for sure, but it seems like he felt so loved and cared for. And then to realize what was actually happening has got to feel awful. And like you were saying earlier, Qur-an, like no amount of money or Super Bowl wins takes that like pain away of feeling like, wait, I thought you were my family, but actually now I'm learning this was a conservatorship and you guys made like hundreds of millions of dollars off of me. But what? Like what?
Yeah. It's a tough pill to swallow for him, I'm sure. I'm sure it is. But I mean, I'm gonna say this, and this is not to give any positivity on the Tuohys. I'm glad Michael took advantage of every bit of it.
Yeah.
He got his education. He was able to make it to the NFL. He was able to be a Super Bowl champion. Not sure if he's in the Hall. He might go in the Hall at some point. So he took advantage of every bit of it, and I'm glad because a lot of times you get used up and you don't get a chance to take advantage of none of it. You just get used up and tossed away. So luckily he was able to take full advantage of everything that every opportunity that came across his path, even though they had their alternatives and what they were trying to do. So I think that's the one positive. But I'm just say about the movie, I think for me, I was always suspicious of the movie when it was never told from his eyes.
Yeah. I want to know, like, who is Michael Lewis, too? Like, where did he come from and why is he writing the book? I think he was friends with Sean Tuohy, they said in the documentary. But, like, why did he write the book? Like, what was the point of that?
Not Michael, yeah.
Right. Like, I really want to hear from Michael. I hope someday we do. Like, I would be really interested to hear his perspective. One thing that really stuck out to me in the documentary was I think a lot of people, like his friends and things like that who were in the documentary were saying like, like just imagine what it was like for him to enter all those locker rooms after this movie came out and everyone thinks you're an idiot. Like everyone thinks you're dumb. You can't read, you can't write. And like, you just walk in and that's the picture they have of you.
Yeah.
I think that probably did travel with him, but I think those, as far as you talk about teammates and coaches, those who probably spent that time with him, those probably could be the complete opposite as well too.
Yeah. True.
As far as getting to know him, knowing the man that he is and who he became as far as an individual as well. But I'm sure those who didn't know him or what have you there, I'm sure it could play the role somewhere along the way there. But I still also think that those who got to know him realize like, hey, this is not what the depiction of him is not true.
Right. And sports, I think as many of us know, is also just such a wonderful outlet for having a team, for having positive supports, for being good for your mental health, like working towards goals and working together collaboratively. That I think too, just the action, obviously, unless you hate the sport, which makes it even worse, but like the sports, I think team can buffer, I would imagine some of the negative impacts of his experience, and I would imagine other people's experiences as well, like him. All right. So is there anything else you guys would like to kind of share about the movie, thoughts, your kind of expertise in sports in general, or anything else that we kind of missed today?
Nah, just I think as a whole, it's interesting we're talking about sports, but in different ways, not actually to being on the field competing. We talk about different areas, whether it's trafficking, whether it's the mental health part of it, transition, what have you there. And it's just, sports parallels life. I mean, we've said that along the way, Zerrell and I, one way or another here, how, the highs, the lows, the things that come with it, and this movie, depicts, like I said, a lot of things, life-related things here, things that were left out maybe intentionally or unintentionally as far as in regards to the Blind Side movie here. But I think sports in general here, it's a lot of people's lives. It's a lot of people's soundtrack to lives. It's the highs, the lows. I mean, I think about, the NFL here, like those who love it, and, folks are miserable for like a whole week if their team loses until that following weekend. It is just interesting how powerful that is, and I think about those who actually are playing, whether it's tennis, whether it's swimming, whether it's lacrosse, just the ability to, not only the physical needs that it helps, but the emotional, psychological, things that it just brings to sports. Like I said, definitely parallels life. And I know you talked about bringing this around, this episode, Aaron, give or take around Super Bowl time, and how interesting the whole trafficking piece came up. That's one of the prime times we're talking about trafficking, especially sex trafficking,
right,
at these sporting events, such as the Super Bowl. Super Bowl, like I said, is unfortunately prime real estate for those who are in that line of work, with these vulnerable individuals that they take advantage of. So it's interesting, like we're talking about this.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think it's tragic, to say the least, and it seems to always be, vulnerable parties. Similarly, we just, recorded an episode on some of the docuseries coming on cults, and we talked just about, right, like there's always a dynamic. There's someone who's, with a lot of power, a lot of privilege, oftentimes also very like, good at people talking and charming, to kind of lure you in, right? And then it's these vulnerable people who are often first, for any reason vulnerable, that kind of fall prey then to these nefarious people who, oftentimes are doing a lot of harm. But, like you said, Zerrell, in Michael's story, it's like the only thing that really is positive is when you do make it and you can take advantage of everything and you do get the deal, and then you have your own connections and you're kind of using like a sponge, sucking up it all, as well. And then obviously the tragic stories as well, when you don't make it and, you're kind of used up and then left with nothing.
Right.
So, no, it's definitely devastating, but
absolutely,
yeah.
I just think, their biggest nightmare is that he did take advantage and he was smarter than they think he is, and now, hopefully, I'm gonna use this word lightly, but hopefully justice is served for him, and he gets what he, whatever he presumes is his,
Right.
and and everybody, I mean, because they got theirs already. They got theirs 10 times over already. And I'm not saying they need to go broke or, people need to cancel them, anything of that nature. I mean, it still was a business transaction at the end of the day. And it just was sad that they didn't tell that young man that it was a business transaction at the end of the day. We was going to give you this to get this, but fortunately he was able to figure that out on his own, and he's speaking out about it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. And he has a family, he's married, he has kids, and it seems like he has a lot of friends, who do know the real Michael, and a lot of teammates and people that he's worked with over the years. So like you said, I mean, that feels like at such a minimum, I mean, I'm selfishly glad for him that like we get to see the other side. But, I remember being really shocked a couple years ago when people kind of came out and were saying that his parents, or that not his parents, the Tuohys were not at like his wedding, and people were like outraged. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And that's where I think for a lot of people who didn't know him or didn't know his story or weren't kind of viewing the movie in a certain way, were like, like, I guess it's not this fairy tale happily ever after story at all. And then now it's like so much more has come out, which I think we should all, be skeptics, right, with what we see, and just in general, what we see in movies, knowing that a movie is always going to be portrayed in a way that's going to make the most money and that's going to get the most people to see it. And I think, we're in this podcast also just trying to give people a different lens to maybe think of when we see movies, so that bad info isn't, scattered around. But I think if anyone else has anything to say, we're almost at time. But Zerrell?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm glad that you guys are doing an episode about the blind side. It's good that these conversations happen and these conversations continue because, Michael might not look at it as sports trafficking, or maybe he does, and maybe this can be a whole start of another conversation that people haven't thought of. And, it's glad that people like you guys are doing an episode and a podcast that can, dissect and get into the real of what really is going on in these, sports, communities and things of that nature. So from behalf of ABSO, I just want to say thank you guys for it.
Well, thank you for coming on. We're so excited to have you here today. And we told a lot of people.
And thank you for doing the work you're doing. I mean, I think you're really doing the groundwork in the trenches. And I think, as a privileged white person, I also want to just recognize that we see it from one lens. And I would just really appreciate if Hollywood would stop, yes, okay, sensationalize, but maybe we could move away from, sensationalizing such like racist ideas forever. Like, I just would really like to get away from that. That's not in my control, but it really just breaks my heart to see this sort of stuff perpetuated and then successful. I mean, I just think it also just speaks to such broader issues in our society that is such success.
Yeah. So where can our listeners find you? Do you guys have a website you'd like to share?
Sure. We have blacksportsofficials.com here. Interest as Zerrell talked about as far as in regards to some of the other things we have going on. Again, our officiating, signing a business that we do, the Independent Sports Alliance here, but we're actually transitioning the educational piece outside of the Association of Black Sports Officials. We're going to do a lot more advocacy work and other things centered around, blacks in that regards here. But the education piece here, just coming under a new umbrella, achieving better sports outcomes. So that's the name of the company here. And again, these topics such as what's being talked about today and everything else as well too. We actually we have a rollout. We're doing something at the Hall of Fame in March as far as a presentation similar to what you went to, Portia. It was actually an all-day one. So we're doing that in the middle of March here so we're excited about that as well, to get that out there as well. And some of the other work that we're doing as well too. So, but at least initially right off the bat here, we could go to blacksportsofficials.com, sports with an S, officials with an S.com.
Great. And I hope it's okay with you. We'll link to all of that in our show notes here if you want to send that to us. And let us know when that presentation is. I'd love to go, if we're able to go. I'd love to. Portia had such great things to say about your talk. I'd really love to learn more and hear more about it.
And we didn't pay her to say that.
No, I know. The funny thing is no one's paying us to do this podcast yet, So
labor of love.
Yeah.
If you're liking it and you're listening, please rate, review, and subscribe. And you can follow us at Analyze Scripts Podcast on Instagram, TikTok. You can watch this podcast on YouTube. And we hope to keep putting out, really good content, educational content, breaking down movies and TV shows. And thank you both so much for joining us. We have been so excited to talk to you. I think you just bring such an important perspective. And I really hope that, you continue doing the good work. And I can't wait to see where it goes.
Same to you ladies as well. This is a great concept, great idea. So looking for this to just take off. And next thing you know, you'll be somewhere in Hollywood yourselves here doing it. So thank you.
Not producing a movie like this. I can guarantee.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you for having us. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.